What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today I have yet another Hidden Gems video, and we're going to be finishing off the offense in today's video. So what I want to go over today is my hidden gem offensive linemen here in Madden 21. Players that you can add to your team that will be able to help your team out right away, whether that be role players or players that could be developed into future starters or future stars for your team. We're going to cover that in today's video, and I want to go ahead and get into some of the offensive linemen. Now, one thing that I absolutely want to say before I actually get into this video is I really thought that I'd be scraping the barrel to try to find hidden gem offensive linemen for you guys here, because good offensive linemen are so few and far between, and realistically finding players that you're going to be able to trade for or access to get onto your team is not necessarily the most easy thing to do, I guess is what I would say. So essentially, I just want to say that this video was actually a little bit easier to make than I thought it would be, because there are quite a few players on this list that I think could be incredibly incredibly valuable for your team, and could be valuable to help turn your team into a powerhouse in Madden 21. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cover over some of the honorable mentions. Now, there are a ton of players that I personally think could be considered honorable mentions. So we're going to start here with one that's on the screen right now, and that is Anthony Fabiano. Now, you guys might be looking at this player and you're like, why is he even included on this list? Because he's 27, he's only a 59 overall, but these are some of the players that are going to be included on this list that you guys might not think about that are going to be extremely useful to your team. And if you guys look at the stat that I'm hovering over for this player, that is why he is included on this list, because Anthony Fabiano is a great example of a role player that you could take and insert to your offensive line right now, right this second, and they would help out your offensive line if used appropriately. The reason that he would help out your offensive line so much is because he would be a perfect plug-and-play guard if you needed one. Yes, he's only a 59 overall, so he's not going to be laying people out. He's not going to be having huge blocks or anything like that, but he has a fantastic combination of athleticism. He's got 70 speed, which is the perfect speed for a guard, 70 and above. He's got 86 strength, which is sufficient enough to block any defensive lineman. He's got 74 agility, which is key to moving and pulling and being able to get those different types of power blocks and sweep blocks and things like that. And he has 84 acceleration. So this guy I had to mention in my honorable mentions here because I feel like he could be a very valuable addition to your team. Now, there are plenty of other guys out here that you could find with very similar stats. We could go up simply and take a look at Cody Wichman, or however you pronounce his name. He would be another value find that you could plug and play into your team and help you out. But we're not going to spend all day going over those guys. There are a few more that I want to cover. Another great honorable mention here is Prince Tega Wanogo, is I believe how you pronounce his name. I probably said that wrong. But he's another one that could be played at pretty much any position because he has a good combination of speed, agility, and acceleration. He's got a little bit low agility, but generally speaking, he wouldn't be on my list because he's a rookie, but he is out here in free agency, so he is worth noting that if you can pick this guy up, you can take him and play him just about anywhere, and he would play just fine. Now, there are a couple other players that are absolutely worth mentioning, guys like Donald Penn that are out here in free agency, Cordy Glenn, Ryan Khalil, Ron Leary, Jared Valdir. I mean, the obvious ones at the top are players that you're going to certainly want to consider adding to your team. But there's one other big-time offensive lineman honorable mention that I want to mention, and that is actually Riley Reiff of the Minnesota Vikings. Riley Reiff is actually a half-decent player in Madden 21, and generally speaking, I like having him on my team. And the reason that I have to put him in here as an honorable mention, because he doesn't generally fit my criteria of a young player or anything like that, is he is on the trade block, and he is a player that has a huge contract that could save this team some money by being dealt away. And every time I'm in a franchise with somebody that is controlling the Vikings, one of their first moves is to trade away Riley Reiff because of how bad his contract is compared to what you're getting for him. And so on the receiving end, a team that could be potentially trying to add a valuable offensive lineman to their O-line or a plug-and-play player, Riley Reid is a great example of that, and a player that you guys should try to target, because you're not going to have to pay a lot to just take him and basically eat the salary cap to help another team out. Basically, you could get him for almost free in most leagues because of the way his contract is. So that is one, the last honorable mention that I want to mention here. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to go through the teams backwards today just for the heck of it. The first one that I want to mention here is right guard Drew Samia, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Could be wrong on that, but a 23-year-old player that's a 67 overall that has a higher overall starter and a better starter in front of him. This is a player that you could potentially get traded away from the Vikings, and he's a fantastic combination of his overall and his age, and he has really good strength to add on top of that. He's a very good offensive lineman. If you can get him and develop him into a starter, he's one that I highly recommend you guys try to target. And if you want to do a combo deal with the Vikings, let's say that you need to entice them to trade Drew Samia your way, go and say, hey, I'll eat that cap penalty, or rather I'll eat that cap salary, I should say, for Riley Reid if you throw into the trade Drew Samia, and I'll throw something in, maybe a pick or something on my side. This is a player that you could very easily, in my opinion, go out and acquire to help your team, because it doesn't immediately detrimentally impact the Vikings. And so that's a very good one to consider. The next one is actually going to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is Chukwuma Okorafor. Chukwuma Okorafor is probably one of the top players on this list simply because he is 23 years old, and the Steelers don't need any help at offensive line. They have Villanueva, Matt Filer, Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro. I mean, they could maybe play Chukwuma Okorafor at right tackle, but they really don't need to with Wisniewski being around and stuff like that. He's available. He's a player that you could certainly make an offer for, and if it's a reasonable offer, you could probably get him for a reasonable price. I mean, he's available. He's got decent strength. He's half decent athletically, a decent blocker. He's a player that you could take at 23 years old and turn into a valuable starter for your team. The next one that I want to talk about, and actually there's probably going to be a few players on this team, is the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens actually have 3 players on this list. The first one is going to be their backup center in Patrick Mekari, I believe is how you say his name. A 23-year-old, 63 overall. Again, a young player that you could probably acquire off of a team that already has a good starting offensive line that you shouldn't really have too much trouble acquiring because of what they have at their other positions, and they've recently brought in good offensive linemen that can play in multiple places. I mean, they have a 78 overall backing up their left tackle, and they brought in rookies like Ben Bredesen, so you could probably go out and you could probably obtain Patrick Mekari for cheap. And then the other 2 players on this team are going to be Bradley Bozeman and Ben Powers for the exact same reasons that I just mentioned. So no matter what this team wants to do offensively, some of these guys are going to be available to move, because this team just simply can't play all of these young offensive linemen when they have good players like Ronnie Stanley or Orlando Brown out there and available, or out there and starting for their team, and they're going to be around for a long time. Bradley Bozeman, if this team wants to go with the youth movement, could certainly be moved for a reasonable price. Likewise, Ben Powers could be moved. I mean, they have a rookie that's almost as good sitting behind both of these guys, and if I was this team, I'd probably be trying to start Ben Bredesen, and I might be looking to move on from Bradley Bozeman and Ben Powers and try to get something back for them. So those are 2 very good players that you guys could target whenever you guys are trying to improve your offensive lines. Now, the next team that has a couple is going to be the Rams. The Rams actually have a left tackle and a right tackle that I believe you guys should go out and try to target that are pretty good hidden gems in David Edwards. Now, this one might be a little bit harder because I believe Andrew Whitworth is kind of on the verge of retirement, and in Madden he'll probably retire within a year, so it might be harder to get his successor off of this team, but David Edwards is a good combination, like I said, of age and overall, and a decent player that you could acquire. And then the other one that is worth considering is Bobby Evans Jr. So Rob Havenstein is a pretty good offensive tackle in the league. I don't see any reason that the Rams are going to move on from him. And with that being said, Bobby Evans Jr. is kind of there and available, and probably not going to necessarily see a lot of playing time, so certainly a player that could be available for you guys to go and get. Next team that we're going to talk about is actually one player off of the Jets. So when we go to the Jets, we're going to actually talk about Chuma Edoga. This one is probably going to be a little bit hard to sell, but if you're somebody that has played as the Jets in Madden 21, as I am, you will recognize the fact that George Fant has an absolutely monstrous contract. And if you kind of want to not have to eat a massive cap penalty and feel bad about it, you're probably going to end up playing this guy just based off the fact that he's got that contract and you need him to produce for you. And otherwise, it's like it just feels bad. So with that being said, you might be able to get Chuma Edoga off the Jets because he's, kind of the odd man out with George Fant signing that long-term deal with the Jets. I know it's an odd situation. Probably going to be hard to get this guy off of the Jets if somebody's controlling that team, but certainly worth a conversation if you guys can go out there and potentially try to trade for that player. The next team is going to be the 49ers, and we're actually going to be talking about left tackle Justin Skule, I believe is how you say his name. Another one that is a fantastic combination of age and overall at a 23-year-old, 65 overall, sitting behind Trent Williams, who just arrived in San Francisco. So that's pretty much the reason that Skule is on this list, is Trent Williams is going to be here for a little while. And unless he retires, which I highly doubt would happen in a franchise based on his age and overall, Skule is available, and I can't see any reason why the 49ers would start a 65 overall over top of a 92. Maybe he could play at a different position, but with that being said, this guy is expendable because of the arrival of an offensive lineman like Trent Williams in front of him. The Washington football team, I almost said Redskins, like I did 15 times in my franchise video. The Washington football team have a couple guys, and that's going to be left tackle Jaron Christian Sr., I believe is how you say his name, and the reason that he's going to be available is because of the draft pick of Sadiq Charles. Sadiq Charles is an obvious starter for this team, 21 years old, 62 overall. I mean, it just purely makes sense, especially with the athleticism of Sadiq Charles, and so Christian Sr. is pretty much, for the taking if you can get him at a half decent price off of the Washington football team. And on top of that, that's not their only player that is worthwhile. They have a left guard that is worthwhile as well, and that is Wes Martin. Wes Martin's a 24-year-old, 65 overall. Might be a little bit harder to get him off of this team because he could be a potential starter over top of Wes Schweitzer, but somebody that is absolutely worth considering. And the one thing that I like the most about Wes Martin is this 92 strength number, which is going to be really helpful if you need somebody to play inside against big D tackles. That 92 strength number is something to look out for, so this is absolutely a guy to target as well. Now, one of my favorites, and probably my favorite of anybody on this list, probably the number one player on this list, and you guys could probably already see this one coming, is Jordan Mailata. Now, why is Jordan Mailata on this list? He doesn't look that great. He's only a 58 overall, but he's 23 years old. He has reasonable speed, strength, agility, and acceleration, and that essentially means he can play any position that he wants, but he has star development. He's one of the only players on this list that has a development trait. I believe the only player on this list that has a development trait, and that is so hard to come by in Madden from time to time, especially with offensive linemen. So I highly recommend that if you guys can find a way to get Jordan Mailata on your team and start him from day one and focus him with XP, make him your focus player and focus your offensive line, you can make this guy a monster at offensive line. He's 6'8", 346 pounds. He's an absolute beast. He's athletic on top of that, and he's only 23 years old. Guys, you got to put this guy at the top of your list, and if you haven't done so already, you need to be reaching out to the Eagles to try and obtain this guy. The next one is going to be on the Dolphins, and that is actually going to be their center, their backup center in Michael Dieter. The reason that he is on here, again, no surprise, 23 years old, 63 overall, and he's sitting behind Ted Karras, who's actually a reasonably effective offensive lineman. So Michael Dieter could potentially be available in your leagues. The next one is going to be on the Cowboys, and this is going to be right guard Connor McGovern. Now, Connor McGovern's on this list for a slightly different reason. Connor McGovern's on this list because there just simply really is not room for him on this offensive line with Lyle Collins, Zach Martin. I guess at center, but they drafted Tyler Biadasz, or however you say his name. He's a rookie, so he realistically should get the start at center. And then Connor Williams at left guard, who was recently drafted, and then Tyrone Smith. Realistically speaking, there's not room for Connor McGovern compared to all those other guys. And so Connor McGovern's the sixth man, should be available, should be able to get him for a decent price, and you can move him inside and outside because he's got that good strength number. He's 6'5", so he's got the right size to play just about anywhere. And this one is a pretty good target for you guys, somebody that you should certainly put towards the top of your list in my personal opinion. And then the next team, and this is going to be the last team that has multiple players on it, is actually going to be the Chargers, and they have the most out of anybody. They have 3 players. So we're going to go to the center position, and we're going to look at Scott Quisenberry. Scott Quisenberry is a pretty decent pickup. He's a little bit older than most of the other guys on this list at 25 years old, but he plays pretty well, and I've used him multiple times, and he's sitting behind Mike Pouncey, who is, potentially going to be there for a while. Mike Pouncey, if you start with injuries on, will be injured. But with that being said, I think Scott Quisenberry's a pretty decent player. The next one on this list is Forrest Lamp. You could also, I guess, insert Dan Feeney into this one, but Forrest Lamp is the player that I choose because of his speed and raw strength combination. Yes, he's 26 years old and he's a 69 overall, so he's not the best combination there, but he has 91 strength paired with really good speed, agility, and acceleration. This guy could play anywhere on the offensive line and do it very well, even at a 69 overall. This is a player that I would absolutely have towards the top of my list and be one of the first players that I try to go out and get. And then the next one to consider is Trey Pipkins. Trey Pipkins is a 23-year-old 62 overall left tackle, another guy that is just very young, and if somebody that's the Chargers doesn't really understand what they have in their offensive line, they could certainly be looking to trade some of these guys away for draft capital and try to draft higher overall linemen. But personally speaking, I wouldn't mind adding a Forrest Lamp or a Trey Pipkins to my team and developing them myself, because you can develop them into pretty good offensive linemen. Then there are 2 more players on this list, a right guard and a left tackle. The right guard is actually going to be on the Browns, and right guard is going to be Drew Forbes. Now, Drew Forbes is a special case. We've had this happen a couple times so far when we've been doing these hidden gems lists. Drew Forbes is injured, so you might have to wait a while to actually be able to go out and get him, depending on what you're starting your leagues on, or if he's available with injury, or exactly how you guys are playing your leagues, whether you started with pre-existing on or not. Drew Forbes is a good option, though, because they have a lot of young linemen that are potential starters ahead of him. And, at a 23-year-old, 64 overall, he's another one that has this really good combo of speed, strength, and acceleration. He's a guy that I like quite a bit to play guard on just about any team, and he's a player that I feel like you guys could take and basically start him right away and have no problems with it. Obviously, a lot of these guys that I've mentioned so far aren't going to be running people over, and they're not going to be the Zach Martins or the David DeCastros of the world, but with that being said, you could develop them into something similar to that if you really know what you're doing and you're really committed to it. And then the final player on this list, and this one's a bit odd. This one's honestly maybe falls more into the honorable mention category, is Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles has only been in the league for 3 years, but he's old in comparison to everybody else. He's 28 years old, but what I love about him is that he has, out of anybody, one of the best athleticism combinations out of probably anybody on this list so far. He might have the best athleticism combination that we've seen on this list so far. And yeah, he's 28 years old and he's a 69 overall, but I am very confident in saying you guys could bring him in and play him just about anywhere and he would be fine. He's not going to be lighting people up, and he's not going to be stonewalling people every single time he goes up against them. But with 74 speed, 90 strength, 74 agility, and 83 acceleration, that's all I need to see to take this guy and plug him at guard or center and be comfortable with it. You know, like I said, he's not going to be eating people up at a 69 overall, but dang, like, you got to look at that combination of athleticism and say you're not going to find that with many other offensive linemen in the league. Even some of the top offensive linemen can't move like that, and they don't have that strength to boot on top of that. I mean, you could take this guy, you could play him at tackle, which is where he's at. You could play him at guard because of his athleticism, and you could put him at center if you needed to play him for his strength. And I like having guys like that on my O-line that I can plug and play wherever I need them to, and I had to include him on this list because of how versatile he really can be in Madden anyways. So that's my hidden gems list for Madden 21 for the offensive line. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and hopefully it helps you guys out in some way. Like I said, when I was making this video, I thought I was going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel quite a bit, and I mean, you might consider that. You know, we didn't find a whole lot of players that are like, you know, close to or in the 70s, but that's just because Madden does such a bad job with the offensive linemen and giving them such low ratings compared to everybody else, and the development is so bad for offensive linemen. They can't earn dev upgrades. It just kind of is what it is. So realistically speaking, finding offensive linemen that are around this overall, like Garrett Bowles, that's a 69 overall, that's a pretty good find, and you have to consider that when you're looking to improve your offensive line. You're looking for utility players a lot of the time, or you're looking for players that you could develop into a good utility player for you. So like I said, hopefully it helps you guys out. If it does, leave a like on the video, comment down below with what you guys would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good night. Peace out.